A couple of months ago, I got a call from my daughter's school. It was about 3 p.m. School had just let out. And she was in the nurse's office. She was crying uncontrollably. What happened was that after school, all of her friends went off to a birthday party that she knew nothing about, and she was devastated. To make matters worse, I have to confess to you that this exact scenario has played out more than once in my household, and that there's something that I could do to prevent it. I actually can anticipate that something like this is going to happen, but I don't. I intentionally drop the ball, and before you start throwing tomatoes at me, because I must be a very mean person and certainly a very bad mom, I'd love to go back in time and explain a little bit about how we got to this very point. My life's work is advancing women and girls. I'm pretty much have decided that that's why I'm on the planet. And so my life is pretty simple. I know what's on my tombstone, and I'm just kind of project managing my life backwards. I do a lot of public speaking, and I would go to an event and I would speak for 45 minutes or an hour about all of these collective solutions that we need to put in place in order for women to thrive and for them to advance. Every time I was finished with my talk and I would open it up for the Q&A, the first set of questions that I would always get from women were personal questions that to me seemingly had nothing to do with what I had just talked about. Right? A woman would raise her hand and she would say, "Yes, Tiffany, so my question is, I noticed that during your talk you said something about your daughter who's 5, and then you said something about your son who's 8, and you mentioned your husband who you said was in Dubai. You're in San Francisco right now, you live in New York, you're gonna be in London tomorrow. How are you doing all of this, right? How are you managing it all?" And I would look around the room and all of the women would be going, "Yes, that is the question that I was wondering. I have no idea what she was talking about that entire 45 minutes. One day I had what I call a Tiffany's epiphany. I literally stepped back from the podium and a voice said to me, "Tiffany, this is not about you. Women are not asking you, how do you manage it all, because they care about the details of your personal life that you don't want to disclose. They're asking you, how do you manage it all, because they're trying to figure out for themselves, how can I manage it all?" I decided that I was going to have to share my story in response to this question, but it was going to be very difficult, and I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to share what I called at that time my dirty feminist secret, which was that for most of my career, while publicly I advocated for women's non-traditional roles in the workplace, outside the home, and I felt that it was very important that we disrupt gender stereotypes in that way. At home, I didn't question any of those stereotypes. At home, I was on Stepford wife autopilot. Miraculously, I was able to maintain this flawlessness at home and at work for a very long time until this life-changing event that occurred, which is that I had a child. It was very difficult to maintain this level of perfection and flawlessness when there were all of these other responsibilities. And so I started doing the one thing that I was always most terrified of doing. I started dropping balls. The first was this unrealistic expectation about who I was supposed to be. So in my journey of dropping the ball, one of the questions that I had to ask myself was, why was I so obsessed with having to do all of these things this way? Well, it turns out that all of us play out different roles in our lives. If we're a woman, our first role is probably daughter. If we're a man, it's probably son. We may become a sister or a brother, certainly a friend. We're all students. At some point, if we're a woman, we become a wife or a mother, definitely a worker. All of us are citizens. And if we're ambitious, then we by default put the word good in front of every single one of these roles. And all of the good roles have these invisible job descriptions. One of the things that I had to do was get really clear about what mattered most to me so that I could recurate the job description. I finally landed that what mattered most to me was advancing women and girls, surprise, surprise, nurturing a really healthy partnership with my husband, and raising conscious global citizens. That's what mattered most to me. The second ball that I had to figure out how to drop was this unrealistic expectation about what I was supposed to do. One of the things that I had to come to grips with was the fact that what you do is far less important than the difference you make. It became what I call my drop the ball question that I now relentlessly ask myself. Is X, Y, or Z, whatever is on the list, my highest and best use in achieving fill in the blank, whatever matters most to me? The third ball that I had to figure out how to drop was my fear of asking for help. The person in the book that I spend the most time exploring, getting that person to ask for help, was my husband. And one of the things that I learned to delegate with joy to him was the management of our kids' social calendar. The challenge is that our society isn't quite yet set up for women who have dropped the ball or for evolved families. For example, no one ever sends a child's birthday party invitation to their father. Now, sometimes I commit what I call a little act of defiance, and I write the person back and I say, thank you so much for inviting Ekua to the birthday party. Her father is her calendar maven. Can you please send him the invitation at his email address? But on some days when I've got a ton of emails and I've got a ton of texts from my little sister and I've got a ton of phone calls and my boss needs something and I've got billboards telling me that I should be skinnier and that my skin should be flawless and I'm just feeling very overwhelmed and I'm asking myself this drop the ball question, is responding to this party invitation my highest and best use in raising a conscious global citizen? The answer is no. And I move on, and that's how we end up at 3 p.m. with the child crying because they missed the birthday party. That's how we ended up here. This is my daughter, Ekua. She loves donuts that have pink frosting and sprinkles. And that night, a couple of months ago, when she missed the birthday party, I didn't feel guilty as I normally would have in my pre-drop the ball days, but I felt empathy for her because she was really sad about the party. So I brought her a donut. I read her a story. Now, some of you might be watching thinking, oh, okay, I get it, but I could not do that. I really couldn't do that. And I want you to know that my heart goes out to you. I completely understand. It's just that in the 7 years since I've dropped the ball, I've been able to run a national women's leadership organization that's trained thousands of women to run for office. I've been able to raise millions of dollars for women's nonprofits, particularly ones that are working on helping our girls develop confidence and character. I've been able to help grow the fastest growing network for millennial professionals in the workplace. And I've even had the bandwidth, think about it, to sit in coffee shops and write a book, right, about this journey. And if any one of those things has made any kind of a difference that will allow my Ekua to grow up in a world where she can be whatever she wants to be and not be encumbered by these crazy, unrealistic expectations, then I feel like it's worth it. I've decided that it's worth it and that the sacrifice might be her missing a couple of birthday parties.